Participants, 2. Hello, other person, whoever you are. So I'm just going to share this and ask whoever comes to just to be able to try and say if they can work out the highest profile subject in your school. I think so. For people who are just logging on, then if you want to just put something in the chat about highest profile subject for parents and what you think the highest profile subject is for the government. You might also, just usefully for me, say what languages you teach and what level. So you can use this for both primary and secondary, but it's quite, I can skew the talk just to give it a something. So I can start by saying I am secondary, French, Spanish, but also teach year 5 and year 6. That's obviously a kind of one lesson a week job. To Charlie there, as we wait for people to join, bit of advice. I'm sure you're on top of this, but if you are actually a training rather than actually a trainer, sort out your CV and letter of application. The jobs market starts in the 2nd week of January. So you wouldn't want to be starting the beginning of next term there. You may well already have a job, in which case it's entirely irrelevant, but here we go. 3rd question is, what activities do you think most motivate your pupils? So just a thumbnail idea, what activities pretty much get them going? Okay, we're now 4 minutes in, so I'm going to make a start. Here we go. Right, the cheery answer is that I think STEM is pretty much the subject that both parents and government love best. And just to give you some idea, they have got £179 million in terms of funding. So just thinking about that, how much it means. If you look at City and Guild's website, you can see that was a big splash across their website, obviously very popular. And STEM teachers in disadvantaged schools get an extra 3,000. So tax-free payments over 3 years, that hasn't happened to modern languages. But as you almost certainly know, then teacher trainers doing modern languages, it's a shortage subject, and you can now have access again to the £25,000 bursary. So really, that's what STEM is. I was involved with Speak to the Future, the campaign for languages. And to give you some idea, we got £75,000 to last us for 5 years. And STEM in the same year got 3 million for a year. So that's sort of where things are going. If you look, then this is the DFE. They fund MFL GCSE volunteer force. So it's using undergrads to actually do what you could say should be funded properly. So really, there should be no doubt in your mind that MFL is the poor cousin. The good news is that because of the EBAC, it's modern languages that is failing, and therefore, in fact, it's the single subject that's getting in the way of the EBAC, and that is trying to be sorted out. So NSELP got 4.8 million recently in 2019. And so I Googled it this morning just to find good news stories about funding in modern languages. Not much there. So if you read this thing in the small print down here, Ofsted, which inspects schools in England, has said that languages are in a pressured position in primary and secondary education. So they say that, and here is the 4.8 million from the government website. So this session is about trying to motivate pupils by getting them to build the tallest paper tower. Now, your first reaction to that should be, where is the French in that? Where's the Spanish in that? The German, etc. This works for any language, and what they think they're doing is having fun building a tower. What you're going to do is to really work it for the language. If there's no language in it, I'm not the least bit interested. There's got to be enough language to make it worth me doing it for them. So some basic ideas then. First one is you're piggybacking on the back of STEM. And one thing to introduce into your schools is STEAM. This is really big in America. That A stands for arts. Second thing, pupils see a competition. You've got the opportunity to really use the language, but they're seeing a fun competition. And I think the answer to my third thing, activities they enjoy, they like a well-judged competition. Wrong sort of competition goes badly wrong, but pupils generally like something that is competitive. If it's in a format they're happy with. And you're going to be able to get large amounts of repetition of your key structures. You need to decide what those are. So you can make it work at pretty much every level. And the good news is there's nothing new here. So physics departments, science departments will have been doing this sort of thing, and kids will just do it. They may already have done it. Blue tack and spaghetti, marshmallows and spaghetti, usually spaghetti and something, sometimes paper. That's the format it usually takes. So I've used this successfully from year 5 to year 11. I've occasionally used it with A-level pupils, and you'll see some of the ideas for that later on. You can change the grammar, you can change the vocab, and it works with all abilities. So in my career recently, I taught in many ways an excellent academy, which had the 5th worst absenteeism rate in England. Now that's significant because people would ask at the end of the lesson, what are we doing next week? It's one hour, 20-minute lesson a week. If you didn't tell them a good story, they just didn't turn up. So it had to be things like, we're building a solar oven, we're doing a chocolate tasting. There had to be good things to get them there because they really weren't coming for the English. For the languages. The language take-up was roughly about 3%. And this is in a very large academy. So that is really worrying. Preparation now, this is the really good news. All you have to do is save A4 scrap paper. You need to get 2 rolls of sellotape, and it's really helpful if you have one of these because it actually makes just getting off bits of sellotape really quick. And you need to make 4 photocopies. And what goes on the 4 photocopies, you're going to skew, but that's entirely it. And once you've set up the lesson, it's probably one of the easiest lessons you'll ever do. It just goes on wheels, and then the bell will ring and you're done. It works really well with a student teacher or a colleague, or perhaps somebody who's doing the language leaders. If you have language leaders in your school, we have them in year 10. It works really well, gives them a chance to do something. You don't need them, but just first time round, if you don't quite know where it's all going, they can actually help dish out the paper and the sellotape. So here it is, la compétition, and you can just put it into your language. You can do it in Chinese, but I would be more careful because it's obviously much less cognate rich. So you need to really work out how much language. But certainly in the languages I speak, compétition, compétition, it works fine. And there we are, that's what it's going to be. And pretty straightforward, tallest tower wins. So you need to get the interest for their part. So I've actually got this done as a set of pictures. So if you don't want to do this bit, the next slides will just rush through them in the PowerPoint, actually make it work. So I'm going to just stop screen sharing and look at, here we go. So camera is, there we go, right. This is the story. So you can see here, I've got a sheet of A4 paper. This is recycled paper. It happens to be hole punched because I didn't want to use real paper, as it were. And it's actually slightly more flimsy than normal high quality bleached white A4. So whatever happens with this, this is going to be marginally worse, but that's not a bad place to start. First thing you want to do is to say compétition, compétition de construction, cylindre, cylindre de papier, c'est très solide. Je vais placer un livre sur le cylindre. Je place le livre sur le cylindre. J'ai placé le livre sur le cylindre. You can see where this is going in terms of past, present, future. So this is PD James. That's a normal size paperback. And I'm going to be using bigger ones because we need to make this go reasonably quickly. So, you know, je vais placer, je place. There, you need a little bit of care with that, but I did this before I got to about 14 books. So we can just keep going here. And I'm doing this at speed, if I could do it a little bit more here. So generally, people are going to be quite interested by this stage. It's getting Le Mariage, no idea what that is doing in our collection. Here we go. Dubliners. Okay, you get the idea, but the idea is that the writer pick them all up, give them to a student who's actually going to see that they actually weigh quite a lot. I use that, let's just get the, right, whoops. So you should be able to get really quite a lot. You're going to get a catastrophic failure. So it's going to scrunch like that. So I measured that as 4 centimeters wide. That's in the, this one is actually slightly narrower and actually would take more books, but there we go. Right. So so really roll into a 2-inch tube. This is what you do. There's no, I think the key thing there is enjoy the collapse. So when it goes wrong, hey, enjoy it. These, if you don't want to do that, but you can see there's quite a lot of, these are just single sheets of paper. There's quite a lot of dictionaries on there, and those are big Chinese dictionaries, not small ones. So we can go through trépied, etc. Some pictures there, and you need to tell them what sellotape is. So sellotape, le scotch, and if you do that, because they're going to ask you for amounts of sellotape, what do they have to do to get some paper? Well, they're going to have to say, je voudrais du papier. Every time they say that, you give them a single sheet of paper. So they form a queue, and what you'll find is that often it's the least able who gets sent to get the paper. So I've done this probably twice, maybe 3 times a year for 15 years plus, no problem. And generally you get to make sort of observations, and that is I think that that's what happens. So could you write in the chat what sentences you would use, and you might want to put it in with a year group. So actually just to say who you would use it with, and what sort of sentences and let's just see some of the sentences that are coming up. Wow, okay, some good ones there. J'ai besoin de papier collant. Year 5, well, good for your year. So j'ai besoin de, obviously a fairly useful one, just to get people going. So right. I think you can use this pretty much up to year 12. I would be a bit suspicious of using it in year 13, just because of what parents might say in an A-level year, you're doing this, etc. Ditto, tend to stay off year 11 for that reason. So, est-ce que je peux avoir une feuille de papier? And I spell est-ce much of the time just as ESK, and when they write it down, depending on what I'm doing, they might have to write out in full. If you don't, people come up with est-ce quoi. So sometimes a shorthand, that's highly personal, you go with what you like. This is much more kind of year 10. Je dois avoir une feuille de papier parce que je vais construire une tour, and je sais faire un tour, mais je ne peux pas parce que je n'ai pas de papier. So that's, you've got negatives in there. You can see that gets translated very, very quickly into something that's useful at GCSE. And if you're doing it at year 12, well, one classic thing is, remember, year 12, nobody really cares about je form. If you were being a little bit easy, you could just say you need the il form more than any other. So, le gouvernement aurait dû acheter du bois. Yeah, il n'a pas fait. Il nous faut trouver du papier. And whoa, well, that's yeah. So, le gouverneur aurait dû something. It didn't do it. Il nous faut, and infinitive. That's a really useful building block. Yeah. Il me faut du papier. So, what I think you've shown in your comments, but also is that for year 5, you might just have je voudrais une feuille de papier or je voudrais du papier. Yep. You then might go on, and I'm going to print out a sheet of paper. I'm going to put these in either in French or I'm going to put them in English. And the point is, if I think they've internalized them, I can put them in English as a reminder, and it becomes a bit like a running dictation. So basically, they need to know it. If they don't know it, they can go and look at one of the 4 photocopied sheets in the classroom on the wall and just to remind themselves. That way, you know that they're repeating this. They're going to need probably something like 30 sheets of paper per team. So that's really quite a lot of paper, and they're going to be coming around and getting it from you. They also need sellotape. So je voudrais 5 cm de scotch, but you can see that's it. So really minimum effort. So what you need to do, though, you do need to present this right, because if you don't give them the right information, it'll be a mess. So the first thing is you need to be really strict on the timings of the competition. They've got to understand it. Yep. You then got to present the structures, but ideally they'll know these already from somewhere else, and it'll be a reminder. It's something you've taught and now you want to use them to repeat them. So present the structures, and then you need to look at rules. And these need to be, the first thing that kids sometimes try to do is sabotage other people's tower. So you need to basically somehow divide a classroom up into space. You don't have to shift any desks. Yep, they need to actually have their own bit. Nobody should be in any else's square in the classroom. You need it standalone. It's got to be on the floor, yep, and it shouldn't be touching anything else. From health and safety, you probably want not to be on a desk. And you also want to have some sort of idea about team size. So I would suggest the smaller the team, the more they have to come up with paper. But in the first time you run this, I would go with something like 4, maybe 5 in a team. Make sure you're really happy with how that works. And then as you get more at your ease with this, you can have smaller teams. You may also have a problem with space in the, you can always have one team in a corridor if that's okay in your school, maybe, may not be. You then got to start the online stopwatch. And I say online stopwatch because it needs to be up on your projector. So kids need to see the stopwatch. As it's going on, and when the first heat of just rushing to get paper slows down a bit, take some photos. This is kind of gold dust for your newsletters, modern languages, events, etc. It shows other people that actually there's a STEM overlap. As you decide, and you're probably going to need 8 minutes before the end of the lesson as a minimum, stop the online stopwatch. Now, one of the really important rules is that it's not the tallest tower, it's the tallest tower at the minute the stopwatch now reads 0000. Otherwise, people say, well, it used to be really good, and you need to underline that. So when the stopwatch runs out, you say, that's it. Yeah, then you've got to adjudicate, and that's usually fairly easy. What often happens is that somebody builds a big tower, they get bigger and bigger, it collapses, and then they have to patch it up. So you almost always have a very easy win. You remember to take, you're going to need some sort of tape measure because they need to serve fairness. If they've worked for you with the construction, then you actually need to have that. And last thing, clear up. Don't underestimate, you need 5 minutes, probably chuck it all in the bin. It's going to have so much sellotape on it. There's no way that's recyclable now. So you have used recyclable paper, but anyway, that's pretty straightforward. So these are straightforward. There were some pictures earlier there, but you can see generally you can get quite tall here. I think one kid's actually standing on a desk. And the one with these are year 5 pupils in the middle down the bottom there. They've misunderstood. Yeah, it's a work of art. They're trying to replicate the Eiffel Tower or something, but they're never going to win. So if you haven't got a clue, make a tripod and a big pole, and that's going to be the format there. You probably want your tripod to have slightly longer legs than they've got, but that's ideal. And in the end, frankly, whatever happens, so long as it's something tall enough to look good in a photo and they're having a good time, all you want them to do is say, je voudrais une feuille de papier, je voudrais une feuille de papier, est-ce que je peux avoir 5 cm de scotch? You're just after working that and working that and working that. That's your bit. Who wins? Well, this is just here so you can nick that slide if you're presenting it to a class. Hey, timing is absolutely everything. If you get the timings wrong, could go a bit wobbly. So if they're still building at the end of the lesson and whatever bell you have has gone, that's a problem because you're going to have to adjudicate. They need to see a winner and you're going to have to clear up. So really be focused. 8 minutes is fine, but any less than that, you're going to be in trouble. Right, save it. There is a national STEM week, cross-curricular project, working with other departments. You might even liaise with science department to see if this could be a joint project. So they might do some of that teaching before for you, but actually you're after je voudrais une feuille de papier or whatever sense it is at that level. So I find it works really well the week before half term or the end of term. They think it's fun and they don't object to just repeating stuff. And if you can just about get it in an end of term newsletter, then that's probably a good thing for MFL. It works really well with other schools. And one good format is to do it as a Zoom meeting, but arrange with the other school that you have periods that overlap. Could be language club in something, could be a class time thing in a lunchtime, depends how you're do it. It works also really well with a French school. The French school do all the language stuff in English, yeah, but actually you're competing with a French school and you can obviously show their class there. I think there's a question: how long would you give them to build? We have 50-minute lessons, and it works really well in 50. We used to have a 35-minute lesson, in which case I would often prepare it in the last 10 minutes of the previous lesson, and then you have more or less solid competition. But again, what you want is to give them enough time, and you just want them endlessly to repeat whatever structures you've prepped them for. So if you're doing it slowly, you can link it to other things like look at the design of the Eiffel Tower. One factoid I picked up over my years is that the pressure of the 4 feet of the Eiffel Tower is less than that of an elephant or of a woman's high-heeled shoe. So basically, part of the genius was to get the shape right and spread the weight out. Otherwise, it would have just effectively sunk into the ground. So honestly, this is, if there's one time you want a lot of photos, this is it. Yeah, they'll almost certainly enjoy it. There's not many kids who won't engage with this in some way, and for that to happen in the languages class is a good thing. European Day of Languages, we sometimes run it and that's an easy activity. So suppose you want to get a homework. Well, basically they film it on their phones, and the way I usually do it with year 5 and 6 is je vais placer un livre, and you can imagine what's coming next. So every time they place a book, they say those 3 sentences, which they have to do, and they just keep going. You get some kids who end up being really quite obsessed by this. So I think the highest number of books we've had is certainly mid-20s. So basically, if you can imagine your tube, what goes wrong is that you don't place them carefully, slowly, book after book. And remember, the first book has to be a hard copy. If it's not, it crunches the end of this, and that's it. So tell them that. If I'm doing it with more able pupils, older classes, I get them to do their kind of version of some sort of Instructables, Blue Peter, whatever. And so we might have coached this language, but aujourd'hui, on va examiner les structures solides. So you can see it's very, very cognate based. Rolled up, I use enroulé, pylon, fine, scotch, etc. Notice the bit in red, that's my future. Because if they're videoing it, it takes them years to roll up 3 sheets of paper. You want them to have those prepared, and then they do that. You get a very nice little thing that will probably take them a minute and a bit, and it depends on how big the collapse is, but you can get something that's quite short. Easy way of doing it is to scroll to just before the end of whatever video they give you. Otherwise, you've got to watch through, and you can lose the thrill of watching kids building paper towers after a bit. So STEM Day works really well. Find allies. So school assembly works really well. You get immediately 2 or 3 teams on the stage doing it, but you then, as to give them enough sufficient build time, you need to then do something in very simple cognate-based stuff. We tend to do the Eiffel Tower, and we tend to do it in years 5, 6, 7, maybe 8. But you do it all in French, and it works particularly well if you get a class to do it. You give each kid 1 or 2 sentences, then you get another class to be on stage doing it. So each kid is simply reading out something that they've you have prepared and scaffolded for them, and they're just reading out, and it's kind of going that way. So video on the school website, do that. You can get your class to do that demonstration, so that the piling it up on this bit here till it collapses may only be 2 minutes. So if you have an overlapping timetable or a year group that has early lunch, you can often make that work. You can do it at other schools, etc. It's not a bad thing. If you actually have a school open day, and I wouldn't want to make a gender-specific comment here, but in my experience, fathers tend to be less interested in work on notice boards and will love a competition like this. So you mix up pupils and parents and you get them to take that comment with a pinch of salt, but often there are people who know they ought to turn up to an open day but don't actually do it. So you run it as, say, an hour's activity or a 40-minute activity, and they've still got to use the French, simple French, to get the piece of paper from you. So basically it's modern languages there. You can do it as races between classes, but again, you need the French out of it, otherwise it doesn't work. So generally, if you like that kind of stuff, I would say all of the resources here. So by that, I mean this PowerPoint, really quite detailed teacher's notes, and some of the exercises are Word documents. But I think my advice would be look at them, but you tweak them for the classes you have to get the duration right, to get it to work. I think that's an important something. Minimum teaching, but it really is, once you've done this, you can do it once a year. You might want to do it once in the middle school, once in your lower school. And it's a really, really good lesson just before, especially a half term or a break. And you really, the joy of it is they will want to repeat the sentences to get the paper, but you've got to make those sentences of a sufficient challenge. If you have je voudrais du papier for a year 10 class, chances are they're going to be relatively bored, but they will generally work there. You want them not to be able to get it right absolutely every time. So that's behind the putting it on the wall and the kind of running dictation idea. So I think that's it. And it works really well as PR because it's so highly visual. You get a photograph of a normal modern languages class. Look at the sort of stock photos that that see in the TS. In a modern languages class, there'll be something like Ola on the blackboard, and there'll be a smiling teacher and a whole load of school kids. Look at the science ones. They're always around some interesting bit of equipment and smiling, and something's blowing up or being built or something. So we never get that kind of PR, and this kind of does it quickly. So 2 links below. I did a sort of creativity in modern languages lecture some time ago. That's the YouTube link. The resources are all there. My email's down the bottom. And if you want to ping me an email, it's worth pointing out that I'm Nick Mayer. Most people, when they see Mayer-N, actually spell it wrongly. So it's M-A-I-R-N. Right, I think that's pretty much, I've raced through that. I think I've got 10 minutes left to go. But if there are any other questions you would like to ask me, shove them in the chat. I've done this format. So you take a bit of what's really an American school science project or science fair presentation, and you basically tweak it to modern languages. So one I've done is one on paper planes, and that's really good. But I don't do a normal paper plane like you're probably thinking, which is a dart, but it's a rectangle of paper. And so they're going to say things like, yeah, je vais piloter un avion, je vais mesurer, je vais couper, je vais plier. So it's je vais something, and the assessment is you get them to do that. Last year for this, I did 3 cups and 3 balls. That's to say the magic trick. So, je vais présenter une illusion. C'est pas compliqué, c'est facile. Il y a 3 tasses, il y a 3 boules de papier. Je vais placer, je place, j'ai placé. And that's a really good one because you're getting if they can do it as a presentation to camera, they've really had to internalize, they really had to internalize the language. So actually the biggest test, they think they're doing something reasonably fun on their phone with a paper plane, a magic trick, whatever. And actually, they're really having to work hard. Remember, for the more able pupils, you're giving them the English, which they then produce in some sort of translation. For the less able, you're giving them the French or the target language with some gaps. And for people who really need the help, you're just giving them the straight language. They're reading it, but the piece of paper is off screen. So when they present it, they're actually reading it out. But the challenge of reading it out and moving your hands at the same time is considerable. Don't underestimate it. Really worth trying it yourself, because if you go back to the one about I'm going to make a pylon, do it yourself, and or do it in a language that you're not quite so confident in. So if you speak other languages and you're less good in another one, you'll see it's not as easy as you think it might be. But remember, look, get the videos, shove them up. Obviously, you're going to check safeguarding stuff there. So I think that's pretty much it. If there are no questions, I can just put it back there. You're absolutely right, Clill, and I think that's exactly it. What do you do with a class that doesn't really like languages? And the answer, I think, is go to popular science and rip off their ideas. So we've done very good ones on statistics by counting colors in Smarties. We've done a good one on temperatures of hibernation. So the good thing about science is that it's almost all cognates. If you look in particular at physics, you get lots of things. Think how many words I've used here: construction, papier, structure, solide. So it doesn't work with history, in my humble opinion. Some people can make it work. I think the problem is that in history, you want to make value judgments, and quite sophisticated value judgments quite quickly, and pupils often don't have that language. I think geography can work quite well, but geography is almost in many cases a borderline science. On my solar ovens pack, and you can find that under Roots into Languages, I start off 2 millions de personnes mortes. Pourquoi? Respirer, la fumée. Yeah, and you go through this, and basically that works, right? I agree. I could agree that history does work extremely well, but it can be quite hard in secondary because they've really moved on in terms of their ability to analyze, but they often don't have the French to go with it. We have done some. We did a thing on World War I life in the trenches, and that works really well because it partly kids sadly are intrigued by anything that's incredibly miserable. And I don't know if you know Chanson de Craon, which if you Google it, C-A-R-O circumflex N-E, quite an interesting bit of trench history that most people don't. So again, I can play an instrument, but I've never been able to really get the maximum out of songs. If you can make history work, fantastic. There's some really good stuff. Doesn't quite work for me. And in the years I mostly teach, the problem is we can't quite get it. There's some really good stuff in geography, looking at maps, for example. Also some really good stuff about what you do in an earthquake or an avalanche. Some of that stuff really engages kids, and it looks like it's again, it's about milking the language. This is total rubbish if they don't use the language. So look, I'm really getting to my end there. So if you have any questions, I'll be very happy. If you might want to know, I budget a maximum of £2 to run this for a class and maybe 2 classes. And I go to the pound shop and I get pound shop sellotape, and 2 rolls will usually see me through 2 classes. But you don't want to run out, because if they're engaging with the competition, it's up to you to get the timings right, to have paper available and scotch. Otherwise, they feel let down. Anyway, remember, it's what works for you, but I think there's an awful lot of richness looking at popular science. There's another one we've just done. We've done the life cycle of the butterfly combined with the hungry caterpillar. And I think those things work really well. There's some great French resources that you can look at. Life cycle of the butterfly. If you can afford it, and we did one year, we got a butterfly breeding kit, around about 30 quid. And actually strung it up in the school, and we looked at it, and we then aimed to release them on open day, which didn't work, but kids get pretty engaged. And yeah, some of the things about chrysalises eating themselves. So you can see where I'm coming from. Hey, for the kids who don't really like languages, there's a lot of mileage in the cool stuff. Right. I should stop the sharing. That's it. Hope it's of interest. And I can see here year 3 DT. What project did you do in the DT? 1 year I made very simple boomerangs. I don't mean boomerangs like Australian boomerang. I mean an indoor boomerang, which is a cross. But I very, very happily rip off any good ideas you have for DT. Type in the post, that would be good. Right, okay. Thank you very much. I hope it's useful. Remember, the timings are everything, but actually, if you do it once and get it through, you'll be fine. So, merci, adios, whatever. Right, okay. Oh, that's a very interesting one. Wow, building a place of worship, building structures. There's some structures, I think they're called zoomorphic, and they're architectural buildings that look like animals. And kids really engage with that. One really good one that's a very standard one is to look at, you describe yourself as a famous building, and I always ban the Eiffel Tower and ban football stadiums. And look at joining different materials. That's a really good one. Some materials are a bit it can be a bit difficult, but actually you've got stuff, and you know, if you have access to some of the things that 1 year we made a little flying man figure, which we just laser cut, got the DT department to do it. Anyway, look, some great ideas there. Somebody said, I think it's zoomorphic, but it's basically architectural buildings inspired by animals. So if you Google, I'm sure I'll be Googling it now, but we've come to it. Thank you very much, and I'll shut it down. Hope you enjoy the rest of the languages show.